ST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net with another opening day around here. I go back and harken back to the old days before the interwebs, and friends of mine covered politics and stuff like that for AP Radio. This guy's been a friend of mine for going on 3 decades now from the early parts of my radio career. He has popped up at various points. I have not had him on in this format in a long, long time. It is great to have Rich Johnson available yet again in the aftermath of Sportspages when you were one of my regular visitors in talking about making the internet work out there. And lo and behold, all these years later, it's a mess out there, Rich Johnson, is it not?
It is. It's enough of a mess. I'm really trying to cut back personally. Professionally, I still can't because I'm doing a whole new thing, which is podcasting. And podcasting kind of goes hand in hand with social media if you want to get anybody to listen, as you know. So as much as I want to get out, as Al Pacino would say, they pull me back.
Absolutely. You can follow Rich at Vegas Podcaster. He is an Oregon Duck. He is a wine drinker and a meat eater and a friend of mine. You're also doing like some podcasting stuff for comedy. And, I know I've had some gold on the program in recent months with your pal Steve Heitner. But, for our background and going into the Wayback Machine, I go through these old Super Bowl photos. I've bared my soul about old Colts memories and the Orioles and Oriole Hall of Famers. I've run some of that stuff the last couple of weeks. I wanted to have you on to talk about Sportspages, but more than that as well, the White House and covering the White House, which you did. But where we are with consuming sports media in the modern era, Rich, it really is incredible. And I don't know that anything illuminates it more than maybe March Madness, where we go tablet by tablet on Thursday and Friday now. The sports bars aren't magic the way they once were. And the way we consume media is so personal these days with our devices, but you are really like sort of a flame carrier for making out-of-town media accessible and available. That was your first pitch to me almost 30 years ago, man.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I hate to admit it, but I was a bit inspired by the Drudge Report, which had been around for a couple of years when I started playing around with the idea of a sports version of the Drudge Report, finding the good stories that you subjectively like, or in my case, me, and sharing the links. Started on a CompuServe page and then eventually got the website. And by about 1997, it was rolling pretty well. A good friend of mine who was the producer-engineer for the Yankees radio network, the late great Brian Ferguson, was an early advocate for this thing, and every time he'd go to a new ballpark, he'd tell the writers about this thing. And by 98, 99, we had a lot of folks in the community. We made a little bit of money selling the list of about 50 to 70 links each day, stuff I thought was good. It was, like I said, a completely subjective list of the best sports journalism of the day, not the boilerplate wires story, but the great opinion, the great perspective, the great personality piece. And, now everybody does that. And also it's tougher to do now because in those days, all those papers were free, and now most of them are behind a paywall or about to be, as they should have been, I have to say, back then, because offering up their stuff free was their path to destruction of the daily newspaper.
Oh man, we could do years of once I get my Baltimore Positive rolling, we will do a complete breakdown of how the Baltimore Sun won away and what it's done to our community and what it's done to how we cover our sports teams and how we cover the Ravens and the Orioles, let alone how we cover City Hall and the State House and crime and the things that have happened in our town. Rich Johnson is here. He's out in Vegas. He's local. He lived here in Maryland for a long time. The fascinating part about Sportspages for me, if I go back to my sporting news, one-on-one sports flash. So I was out in Chicago, and every day part of preparing for a national radio show was having in that day and time, first access to all of the newspapers. That was not available even 3 or 4 years before I was syndicated, before Sportspages came along. It is a fascinating thing, I think, in the modern era, how we subscribe to things, gravitate to things, move toward things, and the polarization of the media, which I know you've witnessed, you've been a part of. How many years did you cover the White House? Like, what Sarah Huckabee Sanders gets paid to do and doesn't do anymore, which is stand up in front of people like you and take questions. That, you covered Obama, but you covered Bush too, right?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I got there in the last year or so when Scott McClellan was President Bush's press secretary. And Scott and the press, it was probably the worst relationship until the current administration. He was just not getting it done. People did not believe him or trust him much, and he was not liking the gig either. And the president reached out to a guy who was literally 20 feet from him in the office, and that was Tony Snow, who was doing a talk show for Fox Radio. And one day he was doing the talk show, and I walk in there, and there's Mary Madeline trying to talk him into becoming the press secretary. And the next day he was gone, and he was the press secretary, and he brought in a whole new era of, he just didn't take it life or death. I mean, he took it seriously. He gave good answers, but he engaged with people. It was the same President Bush, the same policies, but at least we didn't hate each other quite as much. And then his successor, Dana Perino, put a good spin, as good a spin as could be had in those final years of the Bush administration. Regardless of the politics, the relationship between the press secretary and the press, which is a lot more than just the briefing. It's the nuts and bolts, answering the questions, the logistical stuff here and there, and the people under the press secretary. That's what makes that whole thing work. But of course,
historically, was there integrity there? I mean, it sounds like you had a number of different press secretaries. I mean, integrity is at the heart of everything, right? I'm in the sports business. The reason I'm sideways with the Orioles is because they lied. They lied over and over and over again for 15 years. Greg Bader lied before, during, and after, and Angelos lied before, and that has moved into the White House in a way where there's such... You don't even have press conferences anymore. I mean, owners don't meet with... Steve Bisciotti didn't have a press conference this year, and he's about to get roasted by me for that. I just... there used to be some semblance of transparency, and we go back to newspapers and where we were on a daily basis, where you almost had to be transparent because there was some oversight, media-wise, journalism-wise. There was some oversight. Boy, I feel like that's gone not just from the White House. It's kind of gone from every part of our society, and every company props up some version of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who will lie for the company for money and is expected to somehow keep the peace. It's really a bizarre day and time where PR sort of gets right up there with used car dealers of the 1970s or something, right?
It used to be just in Hollywood. And I'll say one little thing about Sanders. It's not so much that she lies, that she's lied to and passes it on, because one of the things about everybody in the White House these days is they come up with a policy and they do what they believe the president and their boss wants to do, and the next day he says, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do something else. And
all you need to do is follow the Twitter line to find out. One day we're good with Guatemala. The next day we think it's Mexico. I don't. It's
exactly.
absolutely bizarre.
One thing about credibility, the coin of the realm, be it especially in Washington, you can prevaricate, you can obfuscate, you can shade, you can shadow, you can no comment and all that. But if you outright lie, you're dead. The only place that really worked on an ongoing basis is Hollywood, where PR people and publicists will regularly lie about their clients. Now, as you said, it is a little more common practice, certainly in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and a bit more in corporate America. Although there's a whole billion-dollar industry called crisis management, and I know a few of those guys. And the first thing they will tell any CEO is, don't lie. If you lie, you're toast. No matter how loathsome your problem is, if you lie about it, you just make it worse. And we see that happen over and over again.
Well, unless you're president. Rich Johnson is here. He is out in Vegas doing things, and we go back with sports and sports pages and politics. How many years were you in the White? I mean, how many years did you sit in that little room that I was only in once? Yeah. I took some pictures when I went there when Obama was president and the Ravens won. Strangely enough, when Obama was president, the media was only allowed in the Garden, and that was a Bisciotti thing, I think, as well. But when Bush was president, I shook hands with him and took a picture with him, and we were inside the White House. Now teams don't even go, or if they go, they're Russian, or they have to answer to, one side or the other about showing up literally for a celebration. But you covered it all. I was in that room one time in my life. I was kind of taken aback as to how small that room was. I know you invited my wife and I down there many, many times as friends to come down and sort of spend the day. as media members and visitors at the White House. Boy, that feels like that was a long, long time ago. Like that's an offer that won't be coming anytime soon. I don't expect to be in that house anytime soon.
Yeah, it was 2005 to 2010 for me, and then I spent another 4 or 5 years at Fox doing politics on the road, covering Congress. I'd fill in at the White House once in a while. And just general news, covered a couple more Super Bowls that way, so a little more variety in my final years.
That allowed us to hang out more often, I think, right, when you were covering Super Bowls.
Yeah, that was good times. So got out here about 5 years ago with a website project that didn't work out. Now I've got this podcast project. That's Gold with Steve Heitner. In case you forget, Steve Heitner was the guy who played Kenny Banya on Seinfeld, who uttered that line, "That's gold, Jerry, gold.
Gold, Jerry, gold."
We do 5 days a week. We're not some serial killer whispering podcast like this. We're out there doing our version of morning radio for 30 to 50 minutes Monday through Friday.
Well, that's kind of what I'm doing. My version of like morning radio. I don't know what I'm doing anymore because where sports and politics have intersected and how it's affected my life, what it's done to the Ravens, what it will do to the Orioles with crime in our city, and me launching Baltimore Positive next month, and all the stuff that I'm trying to do here, Rich. I think it is impossible to not merge one with the other when I'm sitting at the NFL owners meeting last Monday night with Roger Goodell on one side of the lawn. Bisciotti doesn't show up. Kraft can't show up. The owners that are there are trying to put the best face on for the league and for their organizations and where they are. But, we're now at a point where it's reported whether you gave the president money or not, which side of the fence you stand on with him, where your upper deck has to be in regard to the president. I mean, it has changed sports fundamentally. I mean, look at the NBA, right, with where they stand with this president, as well as the NHL when Russian captains get invited to the Stanley Cup celebration, and other goaltenders are saying, "I'm not going." So, I mean, it has really become quite a divided thing. And I remember 2 years ago, Rich, when they told me to stick to sports, and I was almost inclined to listen to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, everybody says, don't get out over your skis, don't expand your horizon, don't be an actual real citizen of this country, and, screw that.
Well, I mean, that's kind of where I stand on this, but I know for you, the sports and politics thing was always sort of a dual passion, right? I mean, this was something. Yeah. Sports was your toy department back in the age of Sportspages and putting that thing together, and I still say you had the best idea of anyone, and I think we talked about that 10 minutes ago as to how it affected things, but I don't think you or I could have ever, even being sort of on the front end of the media side where you had your ideas, and I was one of the first AM radio guys to go to the web, in a time when Howard Stern and Infinity didn't want their product online. They only wanted you to go to the radio in your car and find that they were never going to stream and all of that stuff. But I do find it fascinating how this thing is intersected and how a guy like you really found yourself in one foot on both sides in a pretty major way, man. I mean, I got to hand to you. I mean, you and Keith Olbermann, maybe the only two.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about the web and podcasting and all that, it's just another delivery device. The content is the king, the conversations, the compelling people, the fun times. You deliver it on AM, you deliver it on FM, you deliver it on shortwave, you deliver it on the internet, you podcast it and download it, you stream it live, whatever it is, that's just the technical side. If it's not fun to listen to, nobody's going to listen to it, no matter what the delivery.
You can find Rich out at Vegas Podcaster. And that's, 2 years ago, if I would have gone into a room and said, I'm starting this podcast thing, now people think of me as a podcaster, right? Because I pop up on Facebook Live or YouTube or whatever. We are launching Baltimore Podcast sort of officially as a podcast, right? It's going to be a podcast site with blogs that's going to look like a podcast site in more of a traditional sense than maybe WNST does with ads and standings and box scores and the things that we do that are more traditional to sports. But podcasting, all the kids are doing it. There was a stigma about it, and now I almost feel like the stigma is that I'm still on AM radio. It's kind of weird, man, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, podcasting is DVR for radio. It took 20 years or 30 years after the DVR to finally show up in radio. You can listen to a show anytime, anywhere, for as long as you want. Interrupt it, come back to it, whatever you want to do. And as you'll find with a network, people will come to you, and the subject matter is infinite. There's subjects for left-handed gay beekeepers because people who want to do that'll make it work or not. It's just the market will decide.
Rich Johnson is here. He is all quacked up as a duck out in Oregon. You know, I mean, you are. There's never a time you're not quacking like a duck, but you've moved out to Vegas. Give me a little Vegas primer a year later, right? The last time I left the Strip out there, Ovechkin was carting the cup with Tiesto into the MGM. You at one point lived in Vegas. I remember the night that Trump and Hillary were debating, and I was out there trying to somehow align and find you in the middle of a Rolling Stones cancellation that has led to a whole tour cancellation, Rich. I got a lot of miles back this week when the Stones canceled, but you're out there in Vegas living now, and you have lived there before, and now you show back up, and they have a Stanley Cup, competitive team. They have a football team coming. They have baseball where now, as you've pointed out, they're making all sorts of deals out there, and they also still have gambling, as last I checked, right? And gambling is the real new frontier for sports. I mean, I learn that every time I talk to someone about where the real money is going to be in sports moving forward.
Yeah, it's more and more. Sports betting was always, not a huge part of the casino's overall revenue, but it's something they have to do because it's something people like to do. It's received as value. You put $100 on a game and you got 2.5 hours to sweat it out, as opposed to 5 hands of blackjack and boom, it's gone. So it stretches out your gambling excitement. Speaking of baseball, I live 2 miles away from the new home of the Las Vegas Aviators, which opens up in about a week and a half. I think April 9th is their first game. AAA, they're now an affiliate of the Oakland A's. Changed the name, changed the venue. They're up here in Summerlin, a brand new 10,000-seat ballpark that is just gorgeous. If I never set foot in another casino, I have to say I still love Vegas. I love the lack of humidity, the lack of bugs, 350 days of sunshine, even for a Pacific Northwest snob like me. Turns out all that sun is pretty cool. It just drags me out of bed every morning and says, hey, you're going to go do a mile walk right now.
Rich, in the summer of 1995, my dear friend Scotty P and I made our first trip to Vegas, and we were sitting at the Hard Rock pool where they had black sand, which made it even hotter. It was about 120 that day, okay? And I remember sitting around reading Kevin Burns' notes on Eric Turner and Vinny Testaverde and, Ernest Biner and whatnot. And at that point, Phil Regan had become the manager, 2 years later, the manager of the Las Vegas Stars, I believe they were at that point, or maybe it was the Albuquerque Dukes. It was the Albuquerque Dukes, and they were visiting the Las Vegas Stars, and my pal Mike Oquist was pitching for the Las Vegas Stars. And Scotty P and I got in a cab, and even then it was $25 to go up to Cashman Field. And we got up there, and I got there about 3:30, 4 o'clock, figuring they would be taking BP, And I went into Phil Regan's office, and he was the Albuquerque Dukes. He had just taken the job. And I said to him, how do you do batting practice? And he looked up, and they had the thermometer there. It was 116 degrees at 4:15. And I'm thinking, how do you groom a baseball player taking fungos? Why would you want your prospects in a climate where they're taking BP 45 days in 105 degrees or above? I mean, I just felt like it would be a way to not be very conducive to building baseball players. I thought it was a little moist for that, Rich.
Yeah, the whole dry heat thing, which everybody says is a myth. No, it's real. Now, 120 is 120. That still sucks.
It sucks.
Summerlin is on the edge of the valley up above. It's a good 10 degrees cooler than Las Vegas proper. My advice to you, we're going to get to, is next time you come, hook me up, and I will get you off the Strip. I will get you up to Red Rock. I'll get you down to Henderson and even downtown, and we'll have some fun that may not involve gambling all the time, may not involve walking around with a big quart and a half of slushy alcoholic drink.
Rich, that's why I come to Vegas. You know what I mean? I don't come to Vegas to see the Hoover Dam. You know what I mean? I'm serious. I mean, people come to Vegas for the action, right? If I lived there, I would live out in Summerlin like you, and would hang out at I would hang out at the Palace Casino or whatever it is out Texas. I've been to all those places. I had friends that lived out in Summerlin, and even 20 years ago, back when it was pleasant and they didn't have weed selling on every corner out there, and the Bunny Ranch was something only HBO knew about 20 years ago, and all that. I used to spend more time out there, but At one point I lost a lot of money in investment in Las Vegas. So, I had a condo out there at one point. So I knew all about the suburbs and stuff, but there is a part of Vegas that I think is changing with the sports thing, right? Like the fact that Vegas wrapped itself around a hockey team to the degree it did last year and that it sort of worked. We're all misfits, all that stuff, That was kind of a neat thing to witness out there, aside from the Excalibur show on the roof that I witnessed as well.
There is all that, yeah. Yeah, the teams are changing things. The whole ubiquity of sports betting. Everybody has been predicting it's the end of Vegas. Why would I want to come down to Vegas to gamble when I can go down to Passaic and do it? Well, Passaic is Passaic and Vegas is Vegas, baby.
Hey, there's only one Vegas, and I expect to see you at the Palm Restaurant with a chopped salad and some glass of vino that you select. Rich, it's always good to visit with you. Tell everybody again about your Gold podcast and Steve and all the cool stuff you're doing out there in Vegas, because you do a ton of content, and you have a lot of cool guests on your show, too.
Yeah, we do. That's Gold with Steve Heitner is the podcast. The website is that'sgold.gold, not .com.
That's gold.gold.
All right. And learn all about it. Look at Steve and me and our producer, Greg Peterson, who you should have on because he is a savant about college basketball. He's doing 3-hour, 4-hour daily podcasts during the height of the season. Now he's down to like an hour with only a couple of games left.
And tell him at any point if he wants to discuss Duke losing again, I'll be happy to do that for the next 12 months.
Yeah.
And I don't even like Michigan State.
Talking about that through November.
Hey, Rich, take care of yourself. Enjoy yourself in Vegas as it gets a little warmer out there. You may see me by the pool at some point out there. Since the Stones pulled the plug on their tour, all bets are off here, legitimately.
In the meantime, I found a couple crabs for me, man.
Oh, man, and maybe some soft crabs as well once season comes. He is my longtime friend, Rich Johnson. Great to have him on. Vegas Podcasters, the way to find him and his Oregon Ducks out on Twitter. One of the early movers as the founder of Sportspages. Also a guy that covered the White House. So a lot of background and doing That's Gold with Steve Heitner. That's Gold Show, the way to find them out on Twitter. And you can find him at Vegas Podcaster. You can find me out on the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness at planetfitness.com, where it's still $5 down, $10 a month, as well as our friends at the Maryland Jockey Club, where they're racing down in Laurel, getting ready for the spring meet at Pimlico and the running of the Preakness Stakes. We got our eyes on Bob Baffert out there in Louisville in a couple of weeks, as well as we run for the Roses now inside a month away as the stakes races get going. Last but never least, any breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home. It is the SSV on WNST. I'm wearing my Hammer and Nails shirt. I need haircuts. I got to get out to Owings Mills, see my friends at Hammer and Nails. You heard me talk about them. Find them out on the Owings Mills Town Center. Drop my name, and you'll save some dough first time in as well in Owings Mills. Make sure you find them on the web as well at Hammer and Nails. Don't forget Cole Roofing and our friends at the Gordian Energy. That's the knot. Billy Cole will be on to give me some therapy here this week after taking a little downtime last week out in Phoenix, Arizona. It's baseball season. Almost NBA and NHL playoff season as well, and the NFL draft right around the corner. We'll be following all that. We got our Baltimore Positive launch ahead with Don Moeller. We'll be telling you more about that in the coming weeks as well as we try to make Baltimore better because it's important. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.